Dude, I don't even know what to think or say about all this. It's just so far above my head. All this stuff that's happening. Like, I would ask the question, well, what can we do about all this? But I don't think that you have an answer. What do you foresee happening to American citizens based off of things like BRICS and the devaluation of the dollar? Let's say let's say the people in control don't use the American military to go and try and take more or establish things or bring back the power of the dollar. What happens to the dollar and how we trade here in America as just regular people?
Well, there's like, this stuff is so interesting because it's not like one thing. There's a lot of things that can create something that's very organic. That's why the conspiracy theories don't land well with me anymore, because now I'm just like, even if they tried to, it couldn't last. Like, the stuff is just too hard to manage, or, secrets and things, and they fall apart, relationships. It's just not sustainable. But what we're seeing right now, according to the Wall Street Journal and other outlets, is, we're seeing these, last year we saw the banks defaulting, Silicon Valley and Signature Group banks, these smaller commercial banks. And it's looking like, which I don't know how much this matters. This shit's a big deal regardless, but it looks like the commercial real estate is just going to completely explode and just drop in value. And we're in like all sorts of types of recessions right now. Slow-mo recessions, fast recessions. Cost of living went up 13.5% in 2021. Or 22, excuse me. It's out of this world stuff. And there's a couple of theories, which is, it's so, everybody listen to such broad speculation. One is the United States can quantitative ease, so it can just keep printing. So it can raise the rates higher, which causes real estate to collapse and then bail out real estate like they did before. Or we all lose our houses again, which is like perfect for them. Obama kicked 6 million families out of their homes. That's what happened from the 2008. He bailed out the banks and kicked out 6 million families. Nobody got a bailout, just the banks. Everyone lost their houses. Doesn't matter really why it happened. That's exactly why that's how they decided the value chain was going to be. And from that point on, you haven't had since 2010, you haven't had numbers at the same level of home ownership that you've ever had. Renting has gone up since Obama. And even now, home ownership is declining. It's like 46%, like maybe the lowest it's ever been.
Isn't quantitative easing like a Band-Aid on
It's like not even a bit. Yeah, it's like a Band-Aid on a leg blown off. Yeah, it's like, it's not, because they can print as much money as they want. So if they want to grow a new leg, they just grow a new leg. But there's all these contradictions that come from it, is then it saturates a shit ton of money into the market. So then you get like inflation or hyperinflation. So you got to scoop all that money back, which is what taxes are for. But then we're the ones who have to pay the fucking taxes. And then they give bailout. They bail all these industries out, and then also make them not have to pay taxes either. So where do they get the money back out of the system?
Right.
I don't have a problem with taxes. I actually found out that property tax was created to prevent another landlord class, to prevent another feudalism, because landlords, if they don't have to pay any tax, they can keep buying and buying and buying and buying and buying and buying until they get all of the shit. If you can tax their wealth, then you prevent them from like Bill Gatesing it and just owning all of the land. Okay. So it's actually like, that was the concept, and that was created by like the founding fathers, I think. Like not I don't feel like it was a and maybe not, but I don't think was a controversial concept back then, because I think people understood this, how you get barons out of the way and oligarchs and shit. Like, I can afford my $200 a year on my land tax. If Bill Gates had to pay what I have to pay in land tax, he'd go broke. So, or whatever. But I don't have a problem with like the system taxing me.
Well, taxation is one thing though, but it's not the way to repair a system that has to use quantitative easing to attempt
you
to
could
repair
never
itself.
tax back $6 trillion unless you wanted all your people to starve. Or guess what? You got to get it from the rich, and no one's going to do that in this system.
Yeah,
It's like you have. I mean, it's pathetic. You have like pathetic lefty AOC with her tax the rich, and she's part of the rich, and then you have the other side, people who are like, hey, dude, we should be celebrating the rich because they made it in our system and economy, and they're celebrated. The rich people are celebrated in our system. And you're not going to take that away. You try taxing the rich, people freak out, Look what happened to Bernie Sanders or whatever. Like, anybody who's proposed taxing, you got to get the money back out somehow.
it seems like because there's not a middle ground, because we're devoted to this idea of being able to work hard and make more, and eventually ourselves be making $1 million or something in a year.
Right.
And if you start taxing the rich more, then it seems like that idea or that dream, it gets further away from being achievable by the average guy. And I understand the fear of that, but
But if you could make it impossible to make $1 billion, why do you need more than $1 billion? Why, I think Elon Musk has 200 billion, or
all of
Jeff
his
Bezos. But I'm just
he doesn't have the money.
Yeah,
he has the assets that would acquire that money if he sold them
and
all. And
nobody has that money. That's why that's why I said money has to move in our system. If banks can't even hold on to the money, because if you're Jeff Bezos and you say, hey, I have let's just use a small number, $10 million I'm needing to put somewhere.
a small number.
And you're like, oh, well, we'd love for you to come bring your $10 million to us. We can guarantee 2% yield on your $10 million. Let me say 4. We can guarantee 4%. Sorry. I'm going to give you a real life example of what happened with Signature Group. That's why I'm tying this into. We're going to take your $10 million and we can give you 2% on it. Now, I'm guaranteeing you that I'm going to take your money, hold it, and then give you more money. How am I going to do that? I'm a bank. I go lend it at 4%. So I go lend it to Joe Blow over there for real estate, and he borrows, $300,000 of it for his house, and you get a bunch of those people at 4%, and then I can guarantee that you're going to get your 2% back, and then I just made 2% on it too. Well, what happened with Paradise, I want to call it Paradise Valley Bank. I don't think that's right though. But the Signature Group and the Silicon Valley Bank Silicon Valley had all of the tech money, and they promised a 2% return over 20 years. And then they took that money and they did what they were supposed to do, which was buy federal bonds, which could guarantee 6% over 20 years. So then what happened was people started asking for their money back, and they had it locked up in federal bonds at 6% 20. So they had to start selling off different types of stuff to repay these people withdrawing their money at whatever interest they'd accrued. And then there was a run on the bank. And so word got out, oh, the bank's insolvent, they can't pay me back. And so everyone's like, give me my money back. And then the bank went just completely bust.
So then those people never get their money.
No, the fucking Joe Biden bailed them out. They all bailed them out.
If that didn't happen, then they wouldn't accept up to a certain amount if it's backed by FDIC.
Right, 250,000. And Europe doesn't even have like an FDIC limit like that. They're at like 20 grand or something, like insanely low. I thought 250 was so low for like any bank. So where are you supposed to bank safely with your tens of millions? I mean, this gets so complex. And the way these things are scheduled to make money, and then you add in like the military, and then you add in Wall Street, and shit just gets like, you have the fire sector, finance, insurance, and real estate, which is where they all make their money off of. Real estate is like essentially always a good market because that's where the elite hold their wealth, is in assets. Assets do nothing to add productive value to an economy.
No.
But that's where all the money goes. That's where Wall Street stocks go. And then that's what they show on their GDP is like, oh, we're doing really good.
They're just using it as collateral.
They just need a place to move their money. And what happened with with Silicon Valley Bank was like, because the Fed raised the rate, the bonds couldn't yield as much. And so people wanted to move their money out of the bank. Okay, so when the Feds raised or lowered their rate, I can't remember which, because there's significant differences obviously between the two, but there was better yields on the stock market. So they wanted to pull out of the bank at 2% and go buy stock at 4 to 5%. And so that caused the collapse of the bank, but it was because this other sector opened up where they could get a higher yield on it. So that's what the whole thing about the moving money is like. You can't just sit on money. Like you and I can, but banks don't want to sit on it because they have to make money on it. So it's kind of this another contradiction in capitalism, this perpetuating system. Is like money always has to be made on money. But at what point, like, do you have too much liquidity in the market and there's just fucking saturated money everywhere? Which is where the US dollar is at. I mean, it's everywhere in the world. And the US made all of the countries a while ago just hold our money, not even exchange it anymore. Just keep it in your central bank reserves. Like, you can't cash it in. Don't pull any of the notes.
Wow. Do you think that if BRICS +6 continues at the rate that they're going, that they won't allow the United States to participate in what they're doing?
So I've heard a really good analyst, Pepe Escobar, talk about this, and he said basically, so the whole concept of like, I feel like people in America get China so wrong, and then when I talk about this stuff with everybody, the instant reaction is like, you're pro-China, like, or like, I don't know, it's really weird. But
people are afraid of China because of communism.
Yeah, because our deep state needed a bad guy, and so communism was the perfect tool. So we've just, like, the way we think about communism is the way our previous generations thought about weed, you know? But the same way they thought about communism, I mean, they hated that shit. We've been taught to hate communism our entire lives and everything that's around us in this country, and we know nothing about it. Not a single thing. You go around and ask your 10 neighbors what communism is, they wouldn't be able to explain anything about it. Anything. Outside of like a couple sentence concepts of like, well, it's just everybody gets paid equally and it's a terrible system. Who created it? When was the manifesto written? What was it talking about? Was there any traction? What were communist societies like, or what were communist governments like? What kind of policy choices did they make? How did they flex in the economic system? How did they work in the world? Was it popular? Was it not popular? They don't know any of the history of it. They don't know nothing about it. So we just know little about it, which I think is revealing, for one, of like propaganda, because the joke is, if Cuba and communism are so bad, why not just fucking stop sanctioning it, let it do its own thing and fail on its own? but it survived under the most aggressive sanctions in the world, under communism, in a war economy. So that's something to be said. I lost track a little bit about what.
Talking about BRICS and the U.S. not being involved.
Oh, yeah. So what China... so China is not really interested in conflict. They're more interested in trade and balance, like I was saying before. So what they are, what the idea is like Xi Jinping is basically they're gonna have BRICS and you're gonna have the United States, and then eventually at some point, China is gonna tell the United States like, hey, you got to start trading in our system. Like, we're all not using your system anymore, and you keep wanting to pay us in dollars through this system you're trying to set up, and like, if you want to do trade with us still, you're gonna have to be part of BRICS in a way, or engage in it somehow.
The United States, for a long time, has used its power to do things like put sanctions on China, and we've, I think the words you used was deindustrialized. America deindustrialized itself to outsource all of its stuff to China. Mm-hmm. So we're trillions and trillions of dollars in debt to this nation. So what makes you think that they're gonna allow us to continue doing what we're doing if we're not paying back any of the debts?
Because we've already told everybody that we're not paying back the debts, and this is the cost of having us as the global reserve. So, sorry, you can't cash in on your gold, is what we told Germany 3 years ago. You can't pull any of your notes. This is the burden that we take as the global financial reserve. Oh, and by the way, we're justified in doing so because we buy the most shit in the world.
Right, but if BRICS continues at the rate that it is and the U.S. is not allowed to participate because of that, then wouldn't it make sense to just cut us off?
Well, here's the thing, like, India is very good friends with the United States, or at least tries to play that role. It's very 50-50. And it's a balancing act, and it's interesting to see how India's been treating this, because they really don't want to offend America. They like the trade. They have a lot of security treaties, and they're pretty ingrained in the United States. Yeah, well, they don't want to be in the middle, and they essentially are, because they started with BRICS too, and they're in BRICS, and BRICS is taking off. So there's discussions about that with India that Xi Jinping had with Modi, and was like, hey, I know you kind of want to keep playing these both sides, but it just will not work that way. So you guys are going to have to start getting over that and just like working with us on laying out this global reserve, because you can't guarantee. America's the biggest wild card ever. I mean, I think it was Henry Kissinger said that to be an enemy of America is bad, but to be an ally is like deadly or something. Like, we'll just harvest out. I mean, look what we're doing in Europe right now, just harvesting it right up.
Yeah.
And so I think America's definitely going to have to find its path in the world. It can print its own money, which is uniquely American. No other country can do that when it comes to global trade.
But it's not worth anything.
Well, you're going to deal with a couple of things, which is like, we need some kind of major reset. And I'm not talking about a global reset, but you need a debt jubilee or something. None of that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is America's going to look inward on itself and eat itself. And I think most of the other countries know that. And China plays the long game. Dude, let America just keep self-destructing. You don't even need to war with these people.
Yeah.
They're so aggressive and gnarly, they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
The last thing we want to do is piss them off, because they're the kind of people who would drop the nuke on us and then start World War III. They're the most cowboy fucking people in the world.
Yeah.
And we just need to safely get our money and our economy more disconnected, so when they fucking drop or do something radical, it doesn't cause starvation in our country or these negative side effects. So everybody for the last ever has been so scared of America, and now finally it's like, hey dude, we don't really need to be scared of them anymore. Nobody wants conflict, but fucking we can do things our way. Like, let's just trade amongst each other. They're doing currency swaps right now, and they're doing trades in currency. And something that might show where things are going is that I think it was the IMF, International Monetary Fund, gives predatory loans around the world. There's all stories about it and how it works, but it just give a huge 60 billion to Argentina, which is, I think, one of the largest loans. And China just did a currency swap with Argentina, and Argentina took China's currency and paid the International Monetary Fund debt with it. And it's the first time they've taken non-dollarized payment. So that, I think, is a little bit revealing on what I think the American system, you have a lot of business people. Right now, the quandary in America is the business interests are actually being trumped by the political interests, because it looks like the political interests, they're still going for this global hegemonic game with the Ukraine, and then we're going to do Taiwan next, do the same thing to China that we're doing to Russia. They're in this make-believe land where they think they're whooping Russia's ass. They don't care if they get it off tilt. Doesn't matter, even better. That's the whole point. Let's keep this fucking war going for 30 years. Off balance. Biden said it's going to be a next 20, 30 years wars with Russia and China. And that's the plan. Like Julian Assange said, it's not in Afghanistan. It's not an end to the war or a victory of the war. It's a forever war. It's like money laundering. You can keep the whole system going, printing, and keep moving money back into your system as it goes out. But
so is it safe to say that the United States almost maybe requires war in order to stay alive? Or not the United States, but the economy.
The dollar and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's where I think the war is part of the economic system, but it's more part of the political system. And so right now you have like business people who are like, yo, dude, here's a good example. Biden sanctions manufacturing in China that makes the chips or whatever. America makes this really nice product, and it's some kind of chip. Jason knows the name of it. It's a very common name. Everyone's talking about these chips. We make a really, really good one. Well, China just put tariffs on our country, which usually tariffs can be a really good thing, but put tariffs on our industry that sells these chips to China. Said, we don't want China getting these chips anymore. And you guys are going to be patriotic by like not selling anymore. And then they're like, well, that's a third of our market. Like, where do you want us to go then to make these dividends and profit? Like, where do you want us to make these profits for our shares? Or like, what's the plan?
So China puts in a tariff, which is saying China is not going to buy these chips from America anymore?
No, the U.S. did it to itself. Biden said, you guys, we're not selling to China anymore.
Okay.
Like, screw China. We're keeping the chips themselves. They can't manufacture the chips themselves, so they're going to be screwed.
But China buys a third of them.
A third from our industry, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so China then doesn't get the chips, and then our manufacturing, which we have very little of anymore, can't sell to China. And so what people don't understand is like every single country in the world is interlocked with trade in China, and that's not a bad thing. It's just showing that like if you want to destroy your relationship with China, like where are you going to buy from, or what are you going to get? Like, how do you plan on operating without it? They're buying so much from people and they're selling so much to people. Taiwan's trade with China is like 30% of its exports are Chinese and 35% of its imports are like Taiwanese are like, that's the rate on Taiwan. It's like exports and imports are dominated by China. Same goes with Thailand or so many other countries, and they want you to think that like these people aren't integrated with China, but like in England right now, in Germany and in France, these manufacturers, like, why are you telling us we can't do business with China anymore? Like, why do we have a policy where we are supposed to hate China? And the business interests actually don't want to keep going along with this because they're just watching all this shit get collapsed. And the political aspects are like, no, we're going for like, this is like the nail in the coffin. We'll get it this time. Like, we've got to knock China down a step. It's like, dude, you're way, way too far past that. Like, have you not seen BRICS? Like, you can't do that anymore. Like, learn your place, figure out where your GDP in the world, usually it's relative to population. We're 4% of the population. We should have 4% GDP, not 80, not 50. Like, traditionally it's been relative to population. So we came out on top in World War II. It turned out to be a poison chalice. We were able to sell ourselves out because we had so much money coming in that we had to go re-lend again right away. Yeah. So like that causes problems. So like we had so much money that we were able to actually fully financialize, fully deindustrialize, and thought we could manage the entire world through financialization. And then when it came down to this Russian-Ukraine conflict, boom, real commodities actually work. And he is just going to buy all Russia's debt by buying oil. So they lost their whole European markets, their largest market, and then India's like, we'll take the whole market. Just like that. And then Europe's like, oh, we thought we'd tell them, like, you need us. And Russia was like, well, we don't actually. India's buying. Oh, and by the way, like, India's reselling to you at a higher cost. Oh. You dipshits.
Oh, man.
And the leader's like, cool, that's all right. We're winning. Nope. We're winning. And it's like, no, dude.
Nope.
And the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipeline, largest environmental catastrophe in human history, created by humans.
Was it the U.S.?
Yeah. Yeah. Seymour Hersh, who's considered one of the best journalists, at least in America, in the world, he reported like the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. He broke so many like iconic stories in his lifetime. He wrote for the New York Times, all these people. I mean, he is like one of the upper echelon. He's very old now. He published a document a few months ago on Substack that explained that the U.S. bombed the Nord Stream 1 and 2, and it's like being held up in the UN, and people are like, dude, he lays it all out. He even tells you what where the team of divers came from, where they get trained in Florida. And he's got really good sources. And what he's best known for is never revealing any of his sources and been able to get away with it. And I don't agree with like a lot of stuff he says. Like, he's super anti-Trump. He's all on that train and stuff. But his writing, it speaks for itself. Like when Seymour Hersh writes an article, basically old journalism all in the past, now not with a new wave of stuff where people can't comprehend it, but he actually has like one of the most hardcore records of like any journalists.
Cool.
Yeah. And he kind of laid it all out and proved it, and China brought it up and Russia was like, told you guys so.
Wow.
We know they fucking bombed the shit out of that thing.
Yeah.
Because Russia asked for an investigation, it got declined.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
All of American money is, you said it's based on debt? What was it you said?
Yeah. So it's held in debt.
Held in debt.
Remember how I told you about how we made Saudi Arabia put its profits into Federal Reserve notes? That's it.
Okay.
Hey, put your money in our money. Put your profits in our money. You can sell oil for however you want. We won't invade you. Just take your profits, put in Wall Street. Japan did the shit out of this. That's what caused Japan to collapse in the 80s, which was like it was buying a ton of treasuries. And then it was buying treasuries like when where I told you Federal Reserve rate was at 20%, Volcker shock therapy. So when the federal interest rate raises, that means federal bonds have a higher yield. And that causes things like assets, like real estate, to devalue because no one wants to borrow at that high of an interest.
Yeah.
So Japan was buying tons of federal bonds. The joke was they were like the 13th Federal Reserve chapter of the country because there's 12. They were like the 13th because they were just buying so much of it. And I heard today that was really funny. I can't believe it's true, but it's got to be. Is that like the capital of Japan around like this one area, the real estate was valued so high that it was like more valuable than all the real estate in the U.S. Yeah, like crazy stuff. And then they tanked out, and the U.S. actually crippled them on purpose by dropping the Fed rate.
Go figure.
Yeah, it's financialized warfare, and that's the plan. Is we don't have to send people over there. We don't have to send military over there. We don't have to. We can just fucking raise the interest rate, put these caps on certain things. We can add trade blockages here and there, and then tank some. We can put tariffs on. I mean, it's kind of like talking about this stuff. Talking about economics with people is like so many people want like what's good and what's bad, but it's kind of more like, well, you can use this and it would make sense and be really healthy for a country to do a tariff on this. Or you can weaponize a tariff and completely fuck somebody.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what's been said today, my projected view, I guess, from my understanding of everything we've talked about, my projected view of what optimistically would happen in the United States if BRICS continues and we get cut off. And, you know, unfortunately, I think the most likely scenario is that the people in control try to use the military to undo that or to change it or to take control, more power and control, essentially. That aside, Americans need to eat. You know, Americans need to do what people do to live and survive. So if that happens and we get cut off from resources from other countries, then, you know, I would hope that maybe we'd start doing things like drill for oil here, and all of the stuff that we've deindustrialized and outsourced to other countries, we would start to pick up again so that we can sustain ourselves.
That's the logical path.
Yeah.
You know, you got it right. We need to reindustrialize. We need oil. Every country needs oil. There's no alternative yet. That's why we weaponized oil through the Saudi dollars to American dollars, is if you want oil, you better pony up in dollars. So you can't buy oil in this world without it going through as a dollar exchange first. You cannot. Saudi Arabia is talking about selling their oil in renminbi, the Chinese yuan. This freaked the shit out of America, and it's freaking them out right now. And they just try to do a deal with Saudi Arabia saying that they'll fucking give them nukes if they keep the oil in dollars. Swear.
Who will give them nukes?
The United States.
The United States will give Saudi Arabia nukes if they choose to keep it in dollars instead of change it to Chinese yuan.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Desperation. That's desperation.
Super showing the cards, man.
Yeah.
Super showing the cards. And Saudi Arabia has a brand new leader. He's not a traditionalist. He came into power through some pretty suspect plays, and he's a young guy. His name's Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and he's just like bucking the system.
Mohammed been manipulating.
Well,
or been getting manipulated.
No, he just is. He's like, hey, dude, if you don't want to do this, America, we'll just go find another. We don't need fucking to uphold these last 5 decades of business with you.
Fascinating.
Yeah, he's like, cool, dude. Hey, I'm friends with Putin. Putin's dope. I don't know what you guys see against him. We've always been good trade buddies.
Interesting.
And speaking of it, why don't I just fucking sell oil to China? They want to buy 20% of my oil. Why shouldn't I just sell it to them? Why not?
Yeah.
And everybody's seen in this Ukraine conflict that and through Afghanistan, that the American military is a paper tiger, actually. The sad thing about it is it has also been financialized and harvested out. And it's not actually can't commit a massive land war. It has nothing left but the nuke. That's really it. I mean, China's got a pretty closely matched Navy now.
Paper tiger, you mean it's not as dangerous as it appears?
Yeah, like you go up to it and push it and kind of falls over or something. Like,
I don't know about that.
Well,
it's hard for me to swallow that one.
You look what we did to Iraq in 2003, and they're kicking us out, and we're still just digging our heels in. Here's a perfect example of it. I'll give you a real world example of the American military paper tiger. We have the largest military in the world, right? So you'd think we'd have the largest artillery in the world, the largest Navy in the world, largest.
Yeah.
Kind of close to amassed manpower too.
Yeah.
You'd want to kind of dominate those sectors.
The biggest weapons, the most amount of weapons, the most amount of people operating.
And you'd also want something that people don't consider, which is the largest amount of ammo, right? So, in the Ukraine and Russian war, it's basically Ukraine lost to Russia in March, the first month in, and then the United States took over, and now we're into NATO, and then it'll enter another phase. But essentially right now you've got all of Europe and America keeping Ukraine alive. And I'll give you one simple set of facts. And these are numbers from both sides, the United States Pentagon and the military, and Russian numbers as well. So in the war right now, Russia and Ukraine is firing 6,000 rounds a day of 155 millimeter artillery shells. So the United States can ship Ukraine 30,000 shells a month. And NATO adds a very small amount on top of that, 5,000. So 35,000 a month. They're shooting at 6,000 a day. I think the new numbers are 3,000 a day. Let's just say 6, because that's where I learned this from. This was quite a few months ago. 6,000 shells a day. They only get 35,000 shells, and that means they get, 5, 7 days, 12 days to shoot through all this stuff, and then they're kind of dry.
Yeah.
Well, Russia is Lockheed Martin said hey, we can get more shells, but it'll be next year. We're gonna increase production, and it won't be by very much actually. Russia's over here just full fucking guns, arms manufacturing out the wazoo. They're producing so many 500,000 shells a month, and they were firing 20,000 shells a day, and they were able, or significantly more, and they were able to keep up with the demand, and they were expanding to making 2 million a month, and they're hitting margins and markers. And so why does the U.S. only have maybe the U.S. just does not give a shit at all about Ukraine, and we're literally just doesn't care about even the soil. But U.S. can only put out 30,000 a month rounds to Ukraine, and that's why Biden said in passing, they go, "Why are you sending the cluster bombs?" And he's like, "We're out of ammo." So we're spending $1 trillion a year on our military, and yet Russia and China have hypersonic missiles that can drop a fleet like that so fast. If they wanted to engage with us right now, the Rand Corporation said that we would win, but it would cost us everything, was their conclusion. So for $1 trillion a year, that's what we get out of it. We can't win in Afghanistan. We can't win in Iraq. We can't win in Syria. We can't win, like, Libya's just completely unstable state.
Well, you know, in a powerful military, you got to have all the diversity, equity, and inclusion paid for somehow.
Well, what I feel like it is the reason why it's not a military is not that we don't have the technology or all the cool shit and all the dope stuff and all the great people. I think it's because, and you can talk to almost anybody you've heard in the military like this, it's just, it's a like, it is a money laundering system. You take the money. Halliburton gets the contract for $20 billion. They make the shit at a stupid fucking price to where the point they actually get sued on this sometimes because they're making it 500%, 5,000% the cost for a stupid armor body plate.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, all that stuff. Nothing ever gets made. The money gets moved into a different place. Like, I heard of, like, all the money that we spent in Afghanistan, 90% of it never even made it to that country, or like 95%. $2 trillion, and like 95% of it stayed in the States. And then everybody's still like, we gave them a whole army after that, and still 95% of it stayed in the States. Where'd it go? Like stocks. You know, like, I don't even think they treat the military, even though it's the oligarchs or the systems, like private security force, they're willing to even, like, hollow that out for profit, like find ways how to profit it out. Like, give us $1 trillion a year and we'll just, like, put the mattresses in the warehouse at the end of every year just to make the budget keep going. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah.
And that's like micro. I mean, these people, the guy, General Wesley Clark, I think, is our, like, military guy right now in America, and he came from the military. He went to, like, Halliburton and, like, Raytheon. Now he's back as, like, the leader of the military, and you're just like, what decisions is he making? It's obviously they're making them all full. He knows exactly how to make profits all ways, win or lose. These guys make profits.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think the military is a paper tiger. Not that we don't have, like, the best fighters, but even now the Russian, it's called like a Sukhoi 32, is considered just, like, beat any of our jets hands down.
Really?
Yeah, they've been flying the shit out of that thing in this Ukraine conflict. They're fucking smooth, dude. Like, that's what I've heard. That and I've heard, like, the $1 trillion project for that, what, F-18 or whatever, the F-35, the plane they've been trying to make for 10 years. They can't even get it off the ground. And it's like, that's got to be just a money laundering scheme. They're just telling them, oh yeah, we'll keep working on, we need more money, and then they just fucking keep dicking off. And I'm sure the guys putting it together are trying to figure it all out, but I don't think, I don't know. Maybe they're not getting what they want, but Russia's over here doing real shit, flying real fucking planes really fast and really smoothly, and apparently they're better than our jets now.
I haven't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You want to take a quick break?
Yeah, I do.
All right, back from the break. We are going to go through the rest of our outline here that we have and see if we can get any more functional intel out of Jett.
Word.
So first thing we have down is Ukraine war. We talked about that. We talked about BRICS, the American empire, a little bit about the evolution of money. The current banking system is something that we can talk about. Kind of based on the information that you've researched, what's your opinion of the cashless society, the digital currency world? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that the plan for cashless society is real. You can look into, like, Whitney Webb for all that kind of information. She's the best at it. The plan is that what we've seen is they want to be able to just freeze your bank accounts if you've been a naughty boy.
Yeah.
And they've done that, so it's happening. It's real. And recently, one thing I would just give emphasis on is this is the Western world that wants to do this. There are other parts of the world are cashless, but I think the motives are different in other parts of the world. I think strangulating people into, like, serfdom is uniquely Western, and I think that if you look at other places in the world, so many other places in the world, they're more interested in their societies thriving and industrializing and progressing and growing, not shrinking and seizing the money out of their population and controlling their population.
That's counter to what I hear mostly about China, is that they have the social credit score system, the social credit system, where you can be rated by different people about your service or you as a person or whatever, and it's tied to your bank account, so that they do have ultimate control over you as an individual. So I guess,
I mean, I don't know about China, but I can tell you that here in America we have our credit score, and it does the same thing. You know, like that's one thing that I think is funny, is a lot of people are like, oh, in China they do this, and you're like, yeah, they do that here too.
Yeah, the credit score
they censor the shit out of you here.
Yeah,
they'll
definitely
steal your money straight up out of your bank account. They got you locked and loaded. They track every single thing you do, as Edward Snowden showed us. Like,
yeah.
Who knows if China even does it to that level.
And that's a good point. I haven't been to China. I'm not a citizen of China. I don't actually know. This is based on stuff that I hear.
Right.
But looking here at America, yeah, they track everything. They listen to everything. They put you on lists. They categorize you based on what you buy, what you say.
You have your own profile. You just don't know about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then going to the social, not social, but the credit system, you can't get a loan. You can't do this or that. There's a lot that hinges on your credit score, which if I were loaning people money, I understand.
Right.
I get it. Oh, this dude never freaking paid me back, so I'm not going to loan him anything.
Right.
But I don't know. I think it could be better or different. But yeah.
I mean, our system's pretty hardcore, and they say that like the chickens will come home to roost, and like what they do overseas, they'll do here. And I think, just like extracting all the wealth that they can out of other countries, how they've been doing it for a while, they're just going to turn in and come and harvest out of us, and they have been the whole time. And real wages haven't grown, and everything's getting more expensive all the time. And you just have less and less and less money, and you have to work and work and work and work harder. If they wanted to categorize you into digital cash and activate your profile and shut you out of the economy, what do they care? What does Jeff Bezos care? He doesn't know any real people.
Yeah.
Like when's the last time Jeff Bezos has been in someone's house this size?
Yeah. That's a great point.
Like they don't know real people. They don't really give a shit about how many people die because of this policy or that policy.
Yeah.
And they'll guise it in information collection and efficiency, like, oh, if we can just get everybody on this one system, it'll just be that much more efficient. And then you'll travel will be way easier and all this shit. But then if you don't like the system and you want to protest Cop City, or you want to protest DAPL, or you want to protest the fucking Canadian government, they shut you down.
Yeah.
Like out of life. And then they're getting those people who are protesting Cop City, they're getting them in RICO charges. It's like crazy shit, man.
I don't know Cop City.
Cop City is this build they're trying to do outside of Atlanta that's just insanely huge in its entire city for all these cops to train in and practice in. There's been a lot of people protesting it. One of them they killed out in the forest. A protester, one guy, had his hands above his head. They said that he had a weapon, and then of course the footage comes out, and then the autopsy shows like not possible, and there's no weapon that came up. And there's been people who have been trying to raise funds for the people they're throwing in prison, and then they actually are pressing charges against the institutions that are raising funds, even though these institutions have been around for 50 years. As part of like social justice institutions, raising funds for criminals or like people, on trial.
What's the purpose of the Cop City thing? Like they're building like a training center?
Yeah, it's just a massive training center. And people just aren't hyped, They're just like, we don't want to keep spending money on cops.
Oh.
So.
Got it. Okay.
And then the elites are like, well, yeah, we need to like spend as much money on cops as we can, because when you guys start getting out of control, like that's going to be our private military. That's going to be our local military to fucking police all you guys into fucking going down to the MVD and getting your digital ID. Otherwise, you're going to fucking ticket for it.
Yeah.
And we'll pull you over and take you to jail and impound your car. And you're already like $1,000 behind every month. Then you're just dust. Then you come out of jail homeless. Add to the population, man. And then they hide the homeless population in the prisons and the jails.
Yeah.
It's kind of gnarly.
Interesting. That's a perspective I have thought of but haven't heard in those terms of the police being applied that way.
I kind of ran with it pretty far, but in my head, that's kind of how I would do things if I was the elites. It's like the shit that seems like it's being done.
Yeah. You have to go to
sense to me.
You have to extrapolate to the extreme in order to know.
And then you go to prison and they make stock on you being in prison. So this guy did a documentary where he found these 4 or 5 guys going to prison, helped them liquidate all their assets, their cars, any belongings they had of value, anything, and he took their money, and then he put it into, he found out where they were going to prison, and then he put it into like bonds, because they're private prisons, and they traded on Wall Street. And these private prisons have deals with the states that they have to remain 65% full, otherwise they get to sue the state. And so these guys went to prison, and this guy put their money in their stocks for their prison, so they were making money on themselves being in prison. And that's like a whole new, that's called like neo-slavery or some shit. It's like just imprisoning people for profit. And people don't understand that prisoners make Victoria's Secret clothing, McDonald's uniforms, technology, massive, massive industries of free labor. Or, you know, when I was in prison, guys were getting like a nickel a day.
You were in prison?
Yeah.
What'd you go to prison for?
Weed.
Really?
Yeah.
How long?
4 months.
What was the charge?
DUI.
You'd smoked weed and drove?
No. I just had it in my blood.
Oh, no way.
Dude,
that's weak.
Yeah.
That sucks. That sucks, dude. They don't.
But I was in a private prison in Arizona. Yeah, I could have traded stock on myself or whatever. I could have bought stock for Florence West, which is where I was at. It's a private prison. They didn't even have a fucking police officer there. They had private people. So they actually, I got a ticket for being insubordinate when I was in there. They can't even punish you. A cop comes around once a week, a fucking deputy in a real uniform with a real badge, and writes you a fucking, like, legit ticket.
Interesting.
They can't do, like, they're not legal people. They're not like cops. They're just hired hands, security. They're just trained on, like, how to deal with a prison riot or fucking move the food cart around, or that's it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So as far as digital currency goes, you are not for moving to a fully digital system, it sounds like.
No, dude, I'm actually not. When I think about it, the way things are going, I'm like, fuck, dude, it'd be sick if we could just go back to something like cash. Cash is so sick. It's so cool. You can do so many things with cash. Like, you can pay people and no one will ever know.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. It's like your business. It always should be. It's like, and I'm thinking of like tipping people, you know, just like tipping in cash, always tipping in cash. I'm like, hey, they don't have to report this shit.
Yeah, man.
You know, like, I'm giving them fucking this much, and it's I come with cash to the restaurant, like, or, you know, if I can or whatever. Like,
even now, you go to restaurants and they'll all share the tips. They'll split them for some reason. They don't, like, if like a server, certain restaurants, the waiter or the waitress, they won't make all the tips that they actually earn.
I know, that's why you gotta like tip more now. So it's like even more expensive to go out. It's
or
just like,
it's so messed up.
It's gnarly.
All right, so derivatives. I think we were talking earlier about how all of the value of the American dollar is held through debt. Is that
Yeah, it was. Um, but then no one's going for the debt, and so in 2000, after the dot-com bubble, they said, they flipped it on its head, like Orwellian style, and they said, okay, well, we no longer have like the majority of international exports coming into America, which was how we justified this whole thing. But then we actually bring in the most exports. We buy the most stuff, so therefore we should still be the global reserve. Don't worry about the debt. We'll just hang on to that. And you guys hang on to the debt too. And by the way, probably everybody needs more money. It started by lending, because that's how we got into debt. Was originally after World War II, we had all the gold, and everybody, we were the economic powerhouse. We came out clean. We didn't get a bomb dropped in our country, really. And we had like 70% of international trade like got passed through the dollar. So we told everybody like, oh, well, we can guarantee security in the ocean and in all shipping and in all imports and exports. And we have the largest navy in the world in the military, and you guys should all borrow from us. And then they recycled it back into the like treasury notes, but then they also recycled it into real estate and Wall Street, which creates all sorts of problems that came decades later. But essentially, we would, just give loans out, and they were predatory. It was written in a book called The Economic Hitman. Essentially, how it goes is, we'd go into a third world country and say, hey, you guys need a loan to help develop, and we'd give them a loan at rates we knew they would default at. And then they would default, and then we would say, oh, shit, you guys can't pay. Well, what you need is more money, and you need to privatize your economy. So you got oil, and you've got clean water, and you got this, and you've got that, and you got some gold, and you got some coal. Like, why don't you send Shell in there, and why don't you send these Canadian mining companies in there, and Nestle for water, whatever, and privatize your industries. They know how to run it efficiently. Then you can pay us back, because they'll make sure your industries are run out of profitability, and and then they'll be able to pay you back. And then of course they would default again, and they would just keep loaning money. Was the policy. We're just going to keep, we know the Bank of England can't pay us back.
Yeah.
But we're going to keep loaning it money, and then it'll just owe us that much more, and then we'll have that much more power over them.
Yeah, exactly. We touched on oil, talked about how the money gets laundered, industrialization and its history. We mentioned fiat and digital and finance capitalism. Talked about socialism. We didn't talk about commodities very much. You want to talk about commodities a little bit?
Yeah, I think commodities are like resources, or like real tangible production in trade, buying and selling commodities. That's what we're seeing with the new world that's coming around. Is in a financialized empire like the United States, everything you're trading is essentially, it's become now, it's like speculation and in gambling at the top.
It's like a projection of what's going to happen in the economy. Therefore, that projection is worth this much.
Yeah, it's like speculation and derivatives. So they found a sneaky way to make money, and it's by harvesting out other businesses, and also through real estate. And the money that comes in now is thrown around on Wall Street, and then when they all lose, then fucking that's when they start the quantitative easing to re-bail out all the losers. And then people lose in between. Like Japan's lost a lot of money in our financial system, and same with a lot of sheiks in Saudi Arabia. Japan thought they had our game down, and they were playing it really good, and then we fucking tanked them on messing with the Federal Reserve rate and some other things, and they kind of lost a lot on golf courses and in real estate. We're playing with so much money in Wall Street that, yeah, when it goes, I guess it just makes some people rich out there and then drains a bunch of other people. But if it happens to, there's massive institutions involved that always like Silicon Valley Bank that have to cash out and don't have the cash because their shit's tied up in 20-year bonds or something like that. And there's all sorts of contradictions in the system that make in a massive quandary where it's at now, which is like it can't pay, and it needs to raise the rate to stop inflation. But if it raises the rates, there's just like the whole game's up. So it can't do that. So it's in stagflation.
Yeah.
And so what are they going to do to get out of that? Now that you have BRICS, they're in a full quandary where even quantitative easing it's
not a solution.
Yeah, I mean, how much farther can you push it?
Right, exactly. We talked about GDP and PPP. What does that stand for? The
Purchasing Power Parity.
Okay. And GDP stands for what?
Gross Domestic Product.
Okay.
And I think the reason why purchasing power parity is the better way to rate a country than GDP now is because GDP has been like made into a con game where like if you have a if you have a bank account and you buy something and you have $0 in your bank account, they let you buy it and then they charge you $35 as a service fee for it. That's the kind of shit they record on GDP. That's the kind of finance. That's what they consider a service in reported earnings in our country. So PPP, purchasing power parity, is a better gauge because it's more in tune with how much a country's purchasing, their index.
Okay. It doesn't have those types of fees.
Well, I mean, whoever's got it, doesn't matter. No one's purchasing $35 fees, or they're not being traded anywhere. It's not a real commodity.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's just it's a parasitic gift for you, or like a service for you.
Yeah,
that's their service to you.
Some things that we didn't talk about. Well, we did get to war profiteering, how the paper tiger idea and the money laundering, that the military is basically used as a pawn for money laundering and creating these unnecessary wars to get the contract to rebuild this country after it gets destroyed, basically. And as far as the paper tiger example, my perspective on that is that I think using the American military as a pawn for these types of things does make it into a paper tiger. But as far as its capacity and its potential for a true functional application as a force against another force, I don't think it's a paper tiger in that instance. I think that it's about what's it being used for.
Correct.
How is it being applied?
Correct. Like I don't think there's any general in the United States on any side, no matter the most patriotic guy I just listened to, is running the NATO region, or Europe, for the last 10 years, or from 2014 to some time ago. But he was a general in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was being interviewed. He's the most patriotic guy you'll ever hear, and even he admits one of the most frustrating things when they were in Iraq and Afghanistan was that they had no true north or no goal or no end game or no like plan.
Yeah.
And you can hear that all the way down to the bottom of people who experience that.
Yep.
And you're just like, dude, they had no plan. Like, you're talking about the largest military in the world with the most sophisticated like government finance system, and there's not one person who can put out a report of what the plan's going to be.
Yeah.
And so then they're just out there doing what?
Treading water.
Laundering money, and they
Yeah.
don't even know it, and they're being used to launder money. And in the back, like all the contractors, the military industrial complex is getting hella rich off of this laundered money, and they don't have to build anything quality because they're not going to lose the contract. So
Yeah,
then
exactly.
quality shit goes down. Yeah. But if you told the American military, like, if someone came and invaded us and they had to fight for their lives, they'd kick ass for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, those guys have fired more bullets than like most people in other militaries times 3, like
Yeah.
the amount of ammo they get and all that stuff to train is like really high, but it, exactly like you said, if it was used for a real reason, it could probably hold up, but the reasons are so vague and they're such bullshit that everyone's just like, even the generals don't get an exact plan. So what are they supposed to do? Just loaf around in Iraq while people just throw bombs at them as they drive by?
Literally. Yes.
Yeah, right?
That's
I mean, like,
yeah, exactly.
That's terrible. Like,
Yeah.
what is that for? Like,
Oh, fuck you, pay me.
yeah. I mean, if it wasn't like that, then yeah, it wouldn't be a paper tiger. But it really couldn't even win a bunch of guys wearing sandals on dirt bikes in Afghanistan.
Well, because that's not what it was used for.
There
I mean,
you
that's
go.
that's
It's
not what it
just
was
there
for.
to keep it forever war.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
profit. We didn't talk about the fires in Hawaii. I don't know if you know anything about that or if that plays a part. I know that there's something with they took out an insurance policy on that land, or they created some policy for the specific area that got burned, and they got the contract to rebuild it. Do you know anything about that?
No, but I had heard from a teacher who was at a meeting, like a community meeting. He brought up something that was interesting, which was they passed a policy a few weeks prior to the fire that put the onus into a different category or a different person. So, I don't know.
What does that mean?
Like they changed like the emergency declaration and the structure of power that it goes through the channels. If there's a fire, who decides with the alarm, who touches the alarm, these types of things, what part of the city or state or whatever deals with that, and somehow they had changed the accountability structure a few weeks before, and it's never been done before an emergency, only after one. And they claimed the reason why they changed it was to fight homelessness, a rising homeless population.
Well, they're doing a fantastic job because now there's a ton of people homeless,
Shit,
and they're only
seriously.
paying them $700, a flat fee, $700. Here you go. You need help.
Yeah, dude.
Meanwhile, there's billions going to Ukraine.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't know when the country will figure it out, because the Hawaiians got to figure it out. They're like indigenous people who got colonized here. I've heard a lot of them talk like, I'm American, but America's not my country. I'm like Hawaiian and stuff, and pretty bitter about all that. And that's just the way it goes, though. I mean, like, the more I'm learning about all this stuff, the more when stuff like that happens, I'm like, that's the status quo. Like, people don't know this, but they're paying pensions in Ukraine right now. They don't even pay our pensions. They're not even paying Maui people like $700. Like,
Yeah.
that's over $100 billion to Ukraine easily. It's
Yeah.
almost at 150 or something. It's stupid.
It's pathetic. Human trafficking, drug production, sales, trafficking. I'm assuming a lot of that stuff is also coordinated and a part of the money laundering, the money machine.
Yeah, so drug money in the economy has been called hot money. I've heard it said that, and I don't really understand this, but in 2008, when everything fell so low, you could actually see drug hot money floating in the graphs because it fell so low. It's always there, but you never see it. The heroin, the Golden Triangle, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and the last 20 years with the CIA, the whole time they were cultivating heroin. They use drug money to fund, I guess, explicit operations around the world. They went and asked Congress for money to deal with Nicaragua in the 70s, and Congress denied them. So they got super bitter and said, we're never going to Congress for approval for anything. We're just going to use our hot money to float everything. So just turn up the drug war.
Yeah.
So that's...
They sure did.
Yeah, and then add human trafficking to the mix of that. What some people don't know is like the second largest military contractor, U.S. military contractor, I used to know the name of them, like Globotech or something. My friend worked for him. They do human trafficking. You can Google it, and it's on the internet.
What's it called?
It's like Globotech or G-Tech. It's literally like the second largest American private military contractor.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they have been caught multiple times doing deals with people and using children. And I always told people from a long time ago before Epstein, I was like, dude, child trafficking is just an elite thing. Like, it's how depraved you get when you can buy any kind of body that you want, and then you get tired of all the women, I guess, because you've had them all, every color of hair, or I don't even know how it gets to that level, but
yeah.
They start working on children, and I feel like the elites traffic the children around, and I think there's just, lower scale trafficking, but like human trafficking, I feel like is all part of this system, and the drug trafficking is all managed by the United States.
Yeah, and those two industries are kind of intertwined.
I think so. And I think that's why they don't want to, stop any drug stuff. They want to. That's the sad thing, because then you have local cops who are trying to like right the wrongs.
Yeah.
And maybe they catch a guy and he's from Cuba, and they find out he's linked to the CIA, and the next thing you know, the cop dies.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's just they run the drugs so they can get informal money, hot money.
Yeah. And if you're willing to traffic people, I mean, why wouldn't you traffic other stuff? Drugs, weapons.
Or vice versa, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like, if you're trafficking a bunch of drugs and then one day they just tell you you're taking people, and you're like, fuck, I guess so. I'm not going to say no to the mafia.
Right, or the money.
The cartel, or
the
money, yeah. Once you're in a cartel, how are you going to get out, Yeah. And then the cartel is run by, not run. In my personal theory that I've been working on for the last few months, I think the cartels are managed by the CIA.
I think you're right, at least to some degree. There's a really good episode of the Shawn Ryan Show that talks about this, and I don't recall which one it is. I'll see if I can get it and put it in the show notes for this episode. But he talks about how it's like whack-a-mole, because there's these the cartel they'll pay anybody for this like one service. You go out and you make a batch of fentanyl, we'll pay you this much, don't care who you are, whatever. So there's people all over the place not being tracked doing this, but then above that they're being managed, so it's untrackable, and it's managed by the CIA, but it's easy for them to be hands off about it.
Right, they're completely hands off. They can do it from a phone call or whatever, or maybe they have to send a guy in there, but that guy's not going to be reported if he ever dies or whatever. Like, and they're pretty powerful. Like, CIA has an unlimited budget, really. Like, all the United States has an unlimited budget, so it scares the shit out of everybody.
Yeah,
because They could try to kill you 10 times, and it doesn't matter. They'll just go, and you could say, oh, they're incompetent and idiotic, and they'll just go 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, until they finish it.
Yeah.
It's like they're ornery. They're persistent little fuckers.
And I think the last thing that I want to talk about is something that is based in the Bible. You're not religious, you mentioned prior to this, right?
Yep. I'm not.
Okay. So going to the cashless society, there's something in the Bible that talks about this. There will be peace among the nations, but you won't be able to buy, sell, or trade unless you have this mark. Have you heard about that?
Mm-hmm. For sure. I grew up in religion and like basic American Christianity. The
things that you see, does it give any credence to that type of thing that was written so long ago?
Well, I think that in a system like the one we grew up in and lived in our whole lives, it's like it makes sense that it's an empire that wants total control. So our whole lives, all we've experienced is losing our rights and getting less and less privacy and less rights and more and more control over us. And it's easy to see in a society like that how they would want to do a mark of the beast where everybody has to have the right papers or whatever, or a chip. I do think that's limited to the Western world, There is no mark of the beast in China. People don't know about it. They're not interested in it.
Well, they're not allowed to practice Christianity either.
They are, actually. They are.
Are they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're 2.4% of the population is Christian. Yeah. That probably stopped a while ago. But their biggest religions are folk religions. They're just called folk religions. There are all sorts of stuff, Taoism and little things. Maybe Confucianism is in there. But time will tell if eventually the world, if that's a true prophecy and the Bible is right and people are interpreting it that way correctly. Time will tell, because I think all of that's completely possible with the technology coming. I mean, think about human life in 150 years. That technology will probably be there.
Yeah.
To chip everyone.
Yeah.
And that can always be used for, regardless of like this coming of Satan, that can be used for the coming of a real satanic motherfucker,
That's a generous number, 150 years.
I mean, this shit takes, when you go for control, that's the thing, dude, is like, when you go for control, it's unsustainable out the gate. Like, you can't. It's impossible.
Because people don't want to be controlled, or why?
Human beings are too, erratic. Life is too crazy. You get famines. All sorts of things happen in this world. It's nutballs to the wall.
Unpredictability.
Yeah, and exactly, like, someone you never thought would do that just went and did that.
Yeah.
And you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time, like, the craziest stuff. Like, World War I, Franz Ferdinand, they tried to assassinate him. It didn't work. He was driving around for, an hour, and one of the guys who tried to assassinate him missed or something, or didn't get a shot off, ran away. It was like a bomb or something. Ran away, disappeared into the crowd, whatever, got out, went over and had some coffee. It was at a coffee shop. Franz Ferdinand was being driven around for an hour as they were trying to escape out of the city, but something got messed up with the map or the way to get out, and so the driver was driving around lost, but gassing it, everywhere, because the hit just went out. And he saw a stopping point, and he stopped, and went to look at the map, and it was in front of the cafe, and the guy was right there. He was supposed to assassinate, and just fucking walked right outside and pulled his gun out and shot Franz Ferdinand in the fucking head. And then, like, World War I happens. Like, you know, truth is stranger than fiction. Like, you can't plan this stuff. It's too difficult.
Yeah.
And the American Empire, is like massive of a flex that it had, and all the power and everything. It had the whole world in its hands, and it just Munsoned it, because it just, you can't do that. You can't, like, make it work the way you want it to. And so technology is pretty crazy, though, because AI will be able to do some wild shit, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're already seeing it looking at Chat GPT stuff,
Mm-hmm.
man. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah.
Truth is stranger than fiction. Let's call it there. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, awesome, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.